Now, I have to say, going into this, I'm not like a die-hard Elvis fan or anything, but I'm probably more of a fan than the average person my age, so I'm still very much interested to see the film. And the plot of the film pretty much tells the story of Elvis's entire life. It doesn't really cut off at a point like Bohemian Rhapsody did. You get the full picture with this, start to end. You get to see his highs and lows. And I think it's great how it works with the decades, how we start in the 50s and you see his uprising. And then we move into the 60s where he's become this like movie star and his career's definitely on a downward spiral, and then he sort of has a rebirth and a big comeback and he pretty much peaks. And then we have the 70s where it's him being at the peak and then slowly coming down due to a number of issues. And I think it did a great job of differentiating the decades. It very much feels like, 20 years has passed from the beginning of the film to the end, and they all have a very different feel. It's almost like three movies mushed into one, but not in a bad way. But just to grow on that point, these could be three different films, one on each of the decades, and it'd still be great. But that would be probably harder selling a trilogy of Elvis films over just one. So I see why they just did the single. I was also interested to see Baz Luhrmann's directing it. He's known for this over the top and exaggerated style, and really that matches great with Elvis. Like, let's be honest, look at some of the stuff he wore. So I had full confidence there that mesh of this director and this superstar in real life would work really well. And it does. This is a really creatively made film. There's lots of different editing techniques that make it stand out from something very basic. And it has a very fantasy-like feel to it, with the imagery and the colours, how much they pop and stuff like that. But it honestly works really well, and it's a case where the director perfectly matches the source material, I guess you'd call it. Now, the pace of the film, as I mentioned, this could be three films, but it still works as one. That doesn't mean like this is bad or anything. But at first I was worried because we were going through the 50s and we were just zipping through it. Like, it goes at a rapid speed. But the more I think about it, that kind of works because Elvis's rise seemed quite rapid. It seems like, he went from nothing to everything all at once. So I think it's a good way subconsciously of putting you in the shoes of him. It's all happening so fast, you're kind of overwhelmed. And maybe I'm reaching there and giving too much credit, but that's what I'd like to think. But the rest of the film, there's no pacing issues. It honestly does such a good job of packing so much story into 2.5 hours, and it never feels like it's just breezing over important stuff, or, we go in too fast that we don't get moments with characters. It perfectly balances it, and I think it's a great example of pacing done well, where it could have been easily done horrifically. Now let's get on to the title character himself, Elvis, who's played by Austin Butler, and he does a tremendous job. He honestly does. He really embodies Elvis the person. It's always harder when you're taking on an actual person other than a character, because, they're real. You have somewhat interpretation more with a character, but a real person, there's a very small limit you can change. And he does great. You really get to see Elvis change, as the film goes on, and he presents that great. He feels like he's growing up in front of you. And also, I thought it was insane how he did some of the singing for the 50s stuff, because he does some really good performances. And his voice is great. That's a big thing with Elvis, because Elvis's voice can come off a bit parody-like, you know what I mean? So I think he struck a really good balance of it being his actual voice. I think it's one of those where it's easy to go over the top with it, and he does it just right. But honestly, it really gets into it, because by the end of the film, you see actual footage of Elvis, and you're like, oh yeah, that's what he looks like, yeah. And you completely forget that Austin Butler isn't Elvis. That's how good it is, and I haven't seen that before with a person playing like a music artist. I think this is the best a music artist has been portrayed by an actor. The other main character who it revolves around, as well as Elvis, is his manager, Colonel Tom Parker, and he's played by Tom Hanks, but he's kind of overshadowed because of Austin Butler. But he does a great performance as well. You completely forget it's Tom Hanks. I mean, he's got all the prosthetic makeup on, but he definitely had a bit more leeway because he is kind of mysterious figure in real life. But I think he did a really good job of making this person not seem so black and white. Like, it's easy to just have him as the villain, and if you ask me, he is a bad person overall. But there's moments in the film where he definitely cares about Elvis on a personal level. There's a bit after his first Vegas performance, if you've seen the film, you'll know what I mean. But he cared about his own greed more. And it's a very interesting sort of dynamic between the two characters. And that's what the film is really centered around, the relationship between those two. And I think it shows the benefits of it as well as the negatives. And the rest of the cast do an amazing job. I'm not going to get into everyone specifically because they don't have as big roles as them. But, a few standouts were Elvis's parents and Priscilla Presley. They do fan performances. No one's like slacking. It only takes one bad performance to bring a film down because it just sticks out like a sore thumb. But no, honestly, everyone's great. And I have to say, after this film, it's definitely made me more of a fan. And hopefully his music has a little bit of a resurge after this, kind of like what happened with Queen after Bohemian Rhapsody. So fingers crossed we see that. But yeah, I have to say, this film, if you like numbers, I'm giving it a 9 out of 10. I think it's great. I think it's a must-watch on the big screen. Trust me, you'll regret it if your first time seeing it's just on your TV. And honestly, I think everyone should go and see it. Even if you're not a particular Elvis fan, I think you'll still have a great time with this film. And never know, you might become an Elvis fan after this. So yeah, that's pretty much it. See ya.